Welcome to Tales Universe, where unforgettable stories begin from the very first moment. Get ready to embark on an adventure filled with excitement, drama, and heart-touching imagination. Let's discover together what today holds for us. Ethan always seemed younger than his age, not just because of his frail body, but also due to the pain that reflected in his eyes. In a poor neighborhood, this was the reality fate had imposed on him, a place where people lived in crumbling houses, and the streets were perpetually covered in dust that no rain could wash away. The city screamed misery, and Ethan was one of those who grew up under the shadow of poverty, knowing nothing about life except its hardships. The house he shared with his mother Annie lacked proper furniture. The roof groaned in protest whenever the wind blew, and the walls were crumbling in several spots. Despite this, Annie made extraordinary efforts to provide a better life for herself and her son, even though she was forced to work all day in a distant factory. She had no other choice, but Ethan understood the magnitude of her sacrifices. His father, on the other hand, was absent from his life except for rare moments when he would pass by the house, hunched over in silence, his heart consumed by addiction. He would drift into unconsciousness for hours nearby, indifferent to what was happening around him. Despite his harsh life, Ethan tried hard to smile. He thought a smile might be the key to a better future. Sometimes, he smiled at his mother, even though deep down he knew the smile was merely masking the pain that tore through him. He believed that every smile might bring him closer to a world filled with hope. But that world was far out of reach. Ethan knew little about children who lived better lives, but he secretly hoped that things would improve one day. Then, one day, the unexpected happened. Ethan received devastating news early one morning. "Your mother was in an accident at the factory." Hey! The words hit him like a sudden, blinding light, rendering him incapable of understanding what he had just heard. The words fell into his heart like heavy stones. Annie, his mother, the only person who fought for their survival, was gone. She had died in a factory accident when her arms became entangled in the machinery. She left Ethan to face his dark world alone. That moment marked the beginning of a long, grim journey, a path filled with loneliness. His mother, who had filled his life with hope and sacrifice, was gone. All that was left was his addicted father, who was incapable of offering him anything. Ethan knew he now had to bear the responsibility for himself, but deep down, he still wished for someone to help him. His life began to shift from being a child dreaming of a better future to someone confronting life on his own. Every day, he carved his way through the city, armed only with his fragile determination. He didn't have much food, surviving on whatever scraps he could find. At first, his smile would still flicker in his eyes, but as time passed, he began to feel that smiling no longer made any difference. The days weighed heavily on Ethan after his mother's death. Every morning, he woke up early, surrounded by the ruins and darkness that had become his reality. He didn't have the luxury to mourn or take time to rest. Life had to go on. His father, stumbling from room to room in a drunken haze, offered him nothing but empty promises that things will get better. But Ethan knew these promises were just words that vanished into thin air. In the neighborhood he lived in, Ethan felt like a stranger among everyone else. No one cared for him the way his mother had. The people there endured the same struggles he did, and his life was just another thread in the tapestry of endless, repetitive misery. But that wasn't his primary concern. His only focus was survival. Ethan began to understand the harsh reality of life on the streets. There was no time for play or fun as he had imagined in the past. He became the boy selling food in shadowy corners, begging for spare change from passers-by who were too preoccupied with their own lives to notice him. He carried food to strangers who paid him no attention, all the while repeating to himself, "This isn't the end of the road." Despite the harshness of street life, Ethan found a flicker of hope in the faces of other children working in the nearby neighborhoods. One day, a small girl, perhaps his age, approached him as she sold tiny bags of sweets. She smiled, despite their shared hardships, and it compelled Ethan to stop and talk to her. Her name was Mary, and she came from the same neighborhood. They chatted briefly about their lives, and Ethan was struck by how Mary, despite her own struggles, genuinely cared about his well-being. At first, Ethan struggled to deal with the hope creeping into his heart. But he felt something strange, a spark ignited by this small girl. She made him realize he wasn't entirely alone in his fight, even though the whole world seemed against him. As days passed, Ethan began learning how to navigate life's challenges. He observed others, learned from their experiences, and sought new opportunities to earn a living. He worked wherever he could, carrying goods, cleaning sidewalks, and even helping fix things. It wasn't the life he had dreamed of, but it was the life reality had forced upon him. Over time, Ethan noticed something unsettling. His father was growing sicker by the day. He would forget things and disappear for long stretches. Sometimes, he would hide in dark corners, his eyes filled with tears he didn't know how to confront. But Ethan refused to acknowledge the truth. He tried to stay strong, believing he could change their circumstances if he just tried hard enough. Despite worsening conditions, Ethan began to feel something new: responsibility. He was no longer just a child trying to survive. He was carrying a heavier burden. He wondered silently, would he become the man who protects his ailing father? Or would he pursue his dream of finding a better life? The answer was unclear. But one thing was certain. Life was demanding more from him than he thought he could bear, and he was determined to hold on to whatever hope he had left. One evening, as Ethan made his way home after a long day, he felt something strange. The night air brushed against his face, and the sounds of people in the streets merged into an indistinct hum. Suddenly, a deep, unfamiliar loneliness swept over him, deeper than anything he had felt before. It was a sharper, more piercing feeling than ever. There was no escaping reality. That moment, Ethan realized his life would never return to what it had been. Every step forward in this new world brought with it pain and loss. But one thought burned within him. He couldn't give up now. Weeks passed, and Ethan could feel the heavy weight pressing on his chest. The days blurred together, but he didn't experience them as other children might. Instead of chasing happy moments or new experiences, Ethan faced life as an unending struggle. Each morning, he left his house to continue his work on the streets, and each evening, he returned to a dark home that felt no different from the first morning after his mother's death. He avoided speaking to others, feeling that every word he uttered added to his burden. He thought about every small detail, like how to earn enough money for his father's treatment and how to keep working despite barely being able to stand after a long day. Yet, he tried to stay resilient, for a flicker of hope still burned within him. One night, as Ethan sat on a sidewalk watching life pass by, he saw Mary approaching. Her face glowed with a quiet hope, and she carried a small bag containing leftover sweets she hadn't sold. Despite her own struggles, Mary's heart seemed full of optimism, always finding a bright side to everything. Mary came closer and asked, "Ethan, are you thinking about something important?" Ethan replied with a blank stare. "I'm just thinking about how I can help my dad and survive." But Mary wouldn't accept his answer so easily. "Ethan, why don't you take a break? We're in this together, we can find a way." Yet Ethan, accustomed to solitude, knew that promises meant little in this harsh world. As the days went by, Ethan began facing even greater challenges. A new financial crisis loomed over the impoverished neighborhood. Prices soared unnaturally, and he could no longer afford the food he struggled to provide. Each day, he roamed the nearby markets, trying to sell anything he could gather from the streets. He often felt humiliated, but he had no other choice. One day, while wandering through a narrow alley, he heard a loud commotion. He followed the noise to find a group of men arguing violently in the street. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time, Ethan couldn't escape quickly enough and got caught in the middle of the fight. But a strong-looking young man intervened and saved him from the chaos. "Are you all right?" the young man asked, helping Ethan to his feet. "Yeah, I'm fine," Ethan replied, though his body was trembling. "You shouldn't have been there," the man said with a smile, adding, "But it seems like you've got something I like. If you know how to handle yourself in these streets, you might need some friends." Those simple words were like a small window opening to a broader world. Ethan was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to accept the man's help. That moment marked the beginning of an unexpected change in his life. Ethan knew life wouldn't offer him many chances, so this opportunity felt like a small ray of light in the darkness. As days turned into weeks, Ethan began learning new things about life on the city streets. He learned to strengthen his mind and face daily challenges with determination. Thanks to the young man he had met, Ethan started working in different roles, hauling heavy goods for small shops or helping people repair items they sold. These tasks added to his physical suffering, but they also gave him something else: hope that he could find a way to survive. Over time, Ethan began building connections with many people living in the same area. Mary, too, grew closer to him, and they shared conversations about life and how to cope with its harshness. They developed a mutual understanding, and Ethan noticed that Mary had a unique perspective on things. Despite her struggles, she always found a reason to smile. One cold winter night, as Ethan sat in a corner observing people, he felt something new in his heart, a sense of peace despite life's cruelty. He started to believe he had some inner strength. While he hadn't found the solutions he longed for, he began to think he could face life no matter how difficult it became. But what he didn't yet realize was that the challenges ahead would be far greater than anything he could imagine. And here we are at the end of our journey today in Tales Universe. But remember, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of more adventures waiting for you in every new video. If you enjoyed the story, don't hesitate to like and leave a comment, because your feedback is the fuel that keeps us going. And to always stay tuned for the latest and most exciting content, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Join our big family at Tales Universe, where stories are more than just words. They are worlds to live in, and heroes whose hearts resonate with yours. See you in the next video. The story isn't over yet.